Well, hello, avid readers. I am here with Toni Shiloh, and we are going to be talking about her book, In Search of a Prince, which I'm listening to on Audible and loving so much. I'm about halfway through, but let me just start by saying, welcome, Toni. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love your book. I'm enjoying it so much. Like I mentioned, I'm about halfway through, and I kind of know what's going to happen. There's so many things. There's romance and there's intrigue. There's some kind of a little bit of mystery that I know we got to figure this out. But why don't you show us the cover for those who aren't familiar with it? And then I would just love, yeah, and that cover is gorgeous. Like,
It's
what did
my
you think
favorite.
of? Yeah, what did you think of when you saw the cover?
I actually teared up. Like I literally did. When I first told them, I wanted African American on the cover and a beautiful dress. Like I didn't think it was gonna be like that breathtaking.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely teared up. It's my absolute favorite cover ever.
Yeah, and it's one of those covers. I think it was like, I don't even know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago when I first saw someone talking about it online. And it's like as soon as you see the cover, I'm like, I got to read that book. It looks so good. Like it immediately draws you in. So just tell us like the background and how you got the idea for this book.
Sure. So the book In Search of a Prince is about a middle school teacher who finds out she's a princess. And it actually kind of started back when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle married. There's a lot of talk about,
I love them so much. Let me
right?
just say, I love them. They are awesome.
I do too. And the wedding was beautiful. And there's a lot of talk about, the first American princess, and then two, since she's half black, we're talking about having a black princess. And my mind just kind of, wondered like to my childhood how I really wanted stories about a black princess.
Mhm.
And I just came up with the idea. It's so funny. I came up with the idea of a woman finding out she was secretly a princess. And I was telling my husband, I was like, so what do you think? What do you think of the idea? And he's like, so like the Princess Diaries, right? And I was like, wait, wait, what? He's like, the Princess Diaries. I was like, but no, I was like, because she's an adult. It's an African country. It's not like the Princess Diaries.
Yeah.
But that's what I've seen a lot in all the reviews. So it's pretty funny to me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And what I love about it, well, it's so funny because I think I've seen a lot more. I think that there was a news article probably a couple years ago about a man in Baltimore that did like one of those DNA tests, 23andMe, and he found out like he was a prince in one of the African countries, and he went back there, and it was like 2 weeks of celebration, and you're a prince, and all this stuff, and he had like robes he wore and all this stuff, and he came back to Baltimore with his wife, and she's like, you need to take out the trash now. And he's like, wait, I'm a prince. And she's like, in Africa, yes, but here you still need to take out the trash. And I think it's so, I found siblings. We found a brother on one of those DNA tests. So, you never know. Not that that's part of the storyline, but you never know, like, we could be royalty and we just don't know it.
Exactly. I totally jumped on the bandwagon as well, and I did that. It was actually part of the reason why I did the story based off of Nigerian influences, because
Mm-hmm.
that was a big percentage in my DNA. So I was like, let's explore the culture here. I knew nothing about it, and it was just fun.
And I love how your main character, Bree, like as she's discovering the culture, you're taking the reader along with her. And so she's learning about the government and about the island nation and trade and I mean all the different things. And I feel like we're going along with her and discovering different cultures. And I know it's fictional, but
Right.
also, you had to base it on some true things. So talk about that research and how you were able to kind of make it fictional, but also were inspired by some other real countries.
Sure. So I looked at the area because I wanted to see which African nations were still monarchies and how they
Mm-hmm.
ruled. And then based off of that, I was like, well, do I want to model the country after any of those? But they didn't really have the feel I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, definitely going to make this fictional.
Yeah.
That way I can manipulate things. But I looked at the colonization of West Africa, how having the British and the French come in, what that did to the area
Mm-hmm.
as far as, like the languages and the trade. And I went ahead, and early on, I knew that I wanted France to be the colonizer for the country, mostly because I took French
Oh yeah, there you
in
go.
high school. So I was like, let's use something of my education. So I used them, and I looked at Sao Tome and Principe. They were colonized by Portugal, which I found fascinating. But I looked at like the food that was influenced
Mm-hmm.
because of that. Um, just it's just amazing, like what gets touched just by having a major company come in and a major country come in and colonize the people there. And I had to decide if I wanted the Africans to have already been on the island, or would they have been brought from mainland to the island? Because I read about that in some of the
Mm-hmm.
other island nations. So it was just like pulling pieces here and there, and how I thought it would contribute overall to the story, to make it authentic, but also to serve the purpose of the ending, which you haven't got to yet. So
Yes, I haven't got to it yet. And I love, and I do feel like, I don't know, it's just I mean, first of all, her grandfather, just love him so much. He
so
is
do
so
I.
sweet. But it seems like, I mean, even though it's fictional, if there's some things that are so true to life, like you mentioned one part of the island or is Muslim, and one of my friends, Shamim, she is from, I can't remember what country she's from, but she grew up with a Muslim father and a Christian mother. And she said, like when she got 16, they said, "Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to be Christian or Muslim?" And she had a Bible in English, and she knew English, and she like, and that's why she chose to be Christian. That was like,
Wow.
yeah, that was such an interesting thing. I'm like, well, there's something. But I didn't even understand, like some countries they did have a Muslim influence, and just those things like that when you tie them in, I'm like, oh yeah, that reminds me of Shameen's story or different things. It's so interesting that you're able to weave all these things, and it's fiction, but it seems very true to life. And I love how also she has her friend there with her, like experiencing with it. So I think, and their personalities, I'm just like, yes, please, I want to go to coffee with them. They seem so much fun to hang out with. But I love how, like, if she's feeling overwhelmed, her friend will be like, girl, you just need to calm down. Or her friend will be like, when she's trying to cope with things, like, this is a big deal. Like, her friend is able to kind of reflect, either bring her up or realize, like, oh, this is a big thing. And what are you going to do? And so I think that was a fun element to add to it, to have the friend there within the journey, because I think so much of the time it would be, if it was just her there going and discovering like her place in the country and meeting everybody, it'd kind of be up in her head a lot. And her
Right.
friend, I think, I love that part of the book, and I'm trying not to give anything away, but I love that part of the book where it's just that person to play off with, and their personalities are so fun. They're totally like, I could totally want to hang out with the characters in your book because they seem like really fun people, but also like care about what God thinks, and godly people too. So, how did you develop the characters?
Oh, that's a great question. It's funny because I feel like I had to dig more into Bree's personality. She felt very closed off when I first thought of her. And I know that sounds weird. Some people might find it strange, but to me, the characters kind of like walk into my mind. And
Mm-hmm.
then I have to explore, like, who are you? What makes you tick? What do you believe in? Things of that nature. Iris is an open book and just like shared everything.
And she did. She is so fun. Yeah. If she's thinking it, she's probably saying it. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's so funny because I identify more with characters like Brie. I think, a little standoffish until I get to know a person, and then I'm a chatterbox, and you can't shut me up. But it was fun writing Iris because she's so completely opposite to me. And I thought that it would be difficult to write a person that I'm not like, but she was so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was able to, figure out like what makes a person that way. What makes a person so open. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, I think the fact that she had two parents, she had a sibling.
Mm-hmm.
So things that I feel like naturally contribute to a person's personality is how I go ahead and develop their character. Whereas Bree has experienced loss already, even though she never knew her father, she still missed the loss of him,
Yeah.
who his side of the family was, and it's just her and her mom. So she's a little bit more guarded. And so I just kind of explored what makes them the way they were.
Hmm. I love that. That really comes through, and you would see again. I'm trying not to give too much away, but the relationship with her mom has challenges through the book. I mean, even though her mom was someone she depended on so much, that becomes part of the story too, because suddenly she has this discovery, and she's like, "Why did you hide all this from me for so long?" And so I think that even the journey with the mom is this another element. So you have so many elements. You have your friendship element and discovering who you really are and your purpose and what God has called you to. Then you have like the forgiveness element, and then I'm not going to give anything away because it's in the title. Then
Right.
there's the prince part of it. So that what is love and true love, and can I fulfill what God has asked me to do if it means marrying a perfect stranger? So that is so fun to see the elements. So I'm just really loving the book, and I think, and another thing I really love is even though there's the themes and the romance element, I know this is a book that I could totally pass on to my teen daughters and know that they're going to get a good story out of it. It's not going to be inappropriate in any way or too much for them to handle, that they're going to love the book too.
And that's great to hear. It's so funny because, you go through so many versions of a story.
Mm.
And I think usually after the first draft, I feel really, really good about a story. I'm like, yes, that's great. I love it. And then, like, once I go and reread it again, I have all the doubts. So
I know.
when I reread it, I was like, maybe there's not enough faith. Maybe there's not enough this. Maybe there's not enough that. Like, how am I supposed to know what to keep, what to change, what pieces to move around? And I felt like my brain was going to explode. But sort of like Bree does in the story, I prayed about it. Like, I
Mm.
wanted to make sure. I just felt like this book was so huge in so many different ways, and I didn't want to get anything wrong. So there was a lot of prayer that went to just writing every single day and then revising and editing all of it.
Yeah, and it seems like when you go through that process, sometimes you like, does this story even make sense? Like when you go back and do the editing and the revising, I go through like, I love this book so much to like, oh my goodness, this book, I don't even know. Like there's all those feelings as you're creating this, and then it's out in the world. So I would love to hear like some of the response that you're getting from people now that it's out there and people are reading it.
Yeah, so it's always a little bit nerve wracking once it hits the world. You're like, great, I love the story, but will everyone else love the
Yeah.
story? And it's been real huge blessing to see some of the comments. People have messaged me telling me something as short and sweet as they loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people who are really emotional about feeling represented by the cover
Mm-hmm.
and the people in within the story. So that's a huge thing I don't take lightly. Um, I've seen comments where the people are like, it's like the Bachelorette meets the
Yeah.
Princess Diaries meets Wakanda, like all the different movies. But it seems like the one thing I've seen a lot is people appreciating the faith element,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm so thankful for because worry sometimes as an author, or people kind of think this is preachy. What exactly does being too preachy mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so after a while, you can't focus on that. Just you tell the story as it comes, as you believe that God is giving it to you and hope that people receive it well. And so I'm really happy that everyone's loving the faith elements in it.
Yeah, and I love that too. And I think it's very strong in that she has a lot of questions and she has a lot of doubts, and she's turning to God and she feels God calling her to something. But that doesn't mean like all of a sudden everything's going to be easy, like at all. And I think that's so many times in our lives, which I think is why I can relate to that faith element. It's like, okay, I feel like God is calling me to this, but can't he make it easier? Like, can't this go better right now? And I think that's so good. And it's not just like, I'm going to pray and everything's all right. Like, you really see a faith journey, which to me, I think that's such an important thing in Christian fiction. That's another element. You know, you have the characters, you have the setting, you have the plot. And for me, I love books that have that faith journey, that you really feel like the characters one place at the beginning of the book, and there you see the growth and you see the ups and
Right.
downs in their faith journey. In the end, they're at a different place, and I think that's just as important as any other element of a Christian fiction book.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think too, as the authors, you know, when we write the faith element, I feel like our faith grows too. By
Mm-hmm.
the end of the story, we're touched in some way we may not even realize we need it to be
Yep.
grown in.
Yeah, so good. All right, so Martha said, I really loved how it was such a lovely princess story with modern elements that showed a strong person could still lead a country, but it didn't mean she was perfect. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, and I love that. And then she also said, she had a question. She said, can you tell us about what you're working on next? Which that's where I was going to go next and ask you, what are you working on next?
Sure. So I'm actually finishing up a love inspired story. It's a new series. Don't want to give a lot away, but
Yeah.
it's set in Arkansas. Um,
Woohoo!
I like
Woohoo!
to armchair travel, so I always try and pick a different setting each time I write a story. And this one is about a man who runs a tiny home business and a woman who needs a refuge. That's all I'll say.
Ooh, that sounds awesome. Okay, so I want to hear too, because I know that you've written for Love Inspired. So tell us about maybe some of your other books that you've written too.
Sure. So the one other book I've written with Love Inspired, my first one with them was An Unlikely Proposal.
Mhm.
And it's a marriage of convenience because it's my favorite trope.
Yep.
So a woman, Trinity, she loses her job and she needs health insurance because she's a type 1 diabetic. And she goes to tell her best friend, who happens to be a widower with 2 toddlers, about her problems, and he proposes they get married. So she thinks it's a kind of crazy, but in the end, she says, "Well, you know, the thought has merit, so let's, you know, do this." And then 2 secondary characters in that book will be getting their story in June, with Love Inspired. And so the book I'm actually writing now isn't coming out until the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's always like we have one that we're finished, one that we're promoting, one that we're working on, and then one that's gonna be coming out soon. So
Exactly.
yeah, so I would love to hear like how your writing journey either began or how you got to where you are now, because I think so many people they love to read and they even think like I would love to write books, and then they see like how did it happen for you? So I'd just love to for you to share a little bit about that.
Sure. So I went back to school after leaving the military, and it took me a couple of major changes to find English literature.
Mm.
And I was like, wait, I can read books and get a degree? Like,
This is awesome.
sign me up. And it was during creative writing classes that I really fell in love with it and thought that maybe I actually had some kind of talent. So then I had to do the actual finish the writing novel portion. It's so easy to start them, and finishing them is a total different thing.
Mm.
But I did, and I submitted it, got rejections, and then I was like, okay, now what? So I jumped into the indie publishing,
Mm.
and then I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I think I want to go the other way. And I was published by a small press, Celebrate Lit. They published a series of mine. And then I just kind of been going back and forth between being traditionally published and publishing myself. And I think I'm at 24 books now
Yay.
so far. And I feel like my love for writing and love for reading and the whole industry together just grows with like each book I read or write.
Yeah, that is so good. And what I love about that is that, you know, there are so many different paths. Like you said, okay, I wasn't working with traditional publishing, so I'm going to try indie publishing. And I think that is such a viable option now. And we talk about it even on Avid Readers I'll say, "What are you reading now?" And people will name all these books and name all these authors, and I'll go and look, and probably half or more are indie published. Where they're just on Amazon and they're looking for a good book, and they're not looking. I think back in the day, when I first started writing in the '90s, we would definitely like go to the bookstore and you could see the publishers and you could see their name
Right.
on the binding, and you see, oh, I definitely like books by Bethany House, or I definitely like books by Ravel or whatever. And so now I think it's such a wonderful opportunity, and I know a lot of authors, yourself and others, are doing it. And I've republished some of my books that were out of print, but for some of my books that are coming up soon, I'm doing smaller presses. And so there's such opportunities. Like, it doesn't have to be the same. We're just going to write for a traditional publisher and write one book a year, which we love because we come up with so many more ideas. Like, we have more ideas than just doing one book a year.
Exactly. And for the avid reader and us, like, it gives us more people to read. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know about a lot of other people, but one writer can't write enough books to my reading speed.
Mm-hmm.
I would
Yep.
be bored out of my mind if I depended on only one writer. So having the indie writers and the traditional ones and the hybrids and all of them, to me, as long as the book is good, I will read it. I don't care how it was published. Just give me the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I have books on my Kindle, I have books on my shelf, I have books on Audible, and I have books on my nightstand. Like, I'm always like going, whatever room I'm in, there's a book there. And I'm like you, I'm like, give me the books. I want more books. And so, like, this is the first one I've read of yours. I'm like, oh, I like her. And then it's so good. Now I know that you have all these other books. So I can go, ooh, what else? What else can I read of Tony's? And so that's what I love about introducing new to me authors
Right.
to other people. Other people are like, oh, I've read lots of her books, but I love, because then there's also these other books that we go back and we get to read, and it just opens up so many opportunities. And so it's so fun to discover new authors and to connect with them, and then to see even the different types of books, because you mentioned like some of your books are going to be different than this one. This is definitely like the big saga book. So it's going to be fun to see what other types of books you write. I cannot wait.
Yes, definitely. I don't know. I think because my reading is so eclectic, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of do the same writing ways. But I think the themes, faith elements will always be in my books. And I can't help but put, beloved secondary characters in there. Like, I don't know how to write a story without some secondary character popping up and going, "Hey, what about me? You want to write a
Yeah.
story about me?"
Okay, which is another. So Iris, right, is her friend Iris. Is
Yes.
she gonna have her own book?
Yes, she is.
Oh, okay.
It's called To Win and Prince, and it's coming out in September. So,
Oh, yay! You, so it's already done.
yes, it's already done. I did the cover reveal Monday.
Oh, cool. I'm going to go back and look for it. Oh, so fun. So is it going to be like in the same, like, is this a series that you're going to continue, or?
No, it's not a series. They can definitely stand alone, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you read In Search of Prince, you definitely gonna want to read Iris, and if you read Iris'
Oh, yeah.
story, only you're gonna want to go back and read In Search of a Prince.
Yeah.
But it's on the same island because I don't want to give it away, but there's a reason why it's on.
I just was like, I want to tell you, but I can't tell you.
Yeah, I was like, wait, you haven't finished, so yeah.
Yeah, I have not finished. I'm going to probably by the weekend. I will have this book finished. So,
And then you'll know why she has her own story.
oh, I love it. Well, she's just as a fun character anyway. Like, I just want to hang out with her more. So that's awesome that I get to hang out with her more.
Yeah, she definitely had me laughing, and it was one of those moments where like, well, I hope I'm not the only one's gonna laugh at these parts.
Yeah, no, I'm laughing and smiling, and it's so funny because I'm like cooking and looking around like, oh, people just think I'm in here just like laughing by myself. So good. Okay, so we know that that book's coming out in September. Is there books that you're like have in your mind that you haven't started writing yet? I mean, authors, I think we always have like this book that I'm writing, and then there's these other stories.
I do. I always have stories. I have stories in other genres that feel like they'll just be a dream because I don't have time to get to them. And I just keep a file. Every
Mm-hmm.
time an idea pops up, I put it in a file and I'm like, one day you'll get your turn, hopefully.
And then they get loud enough, then finally you're like, hey, okay, this is your turn.
Exactly.
That is so good. Okay, so I always love to ask this too. What are some Christian fiction books that you really enjoyed and that you love to tell other people about?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I read a lot. So I feel like that answer's always changing. But the books that have never left my mind, Becky Wade's My Stubborn Heart.
Mm.
It's a reread for me. I have to reread it at least once a year. I love it that much. Um, Nicole Deese, I'll say anything by her. She usually makes me break out the tissues,
Mm.
and I have to, I have to just read anything she writes. And then who else? I'm thinking. Ronnie Kendick. I read
Mm-hmm.
all her books, which actually you could probably tell.
Yeah, you can see. You can see from your shelf, like, oh, who do you have back there?
Yeah, but I probably have like a favorite author in every subgenre of Christian fiction.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are some good ones. So yeah, that I think a lot of readers love those books. Um, so is your favorite genre like reading contemporary fiction, or do you like
Hmm.
venture out?
I'll probably, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of like what books I own more. I do read a lot of contemporary fiction, but I really love Regencies.
Mm,
Um, I love romantic suspense. And I mean, I read in every
yeah,
category.
yeah. Are you gonna? Would you ever consider writing a Regency?
Oh, that's funny. That's probably the one era I haven't considered. Like I've had a romantic suspense idea. I've even had fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the historical idea I did have is not Regency.
So maybe
But
consider. It's
I
gonna go in
know.
your idea file now. I
I
can
know,
see you.
right?
I can totally see your brain working. Like I can see it right now. Your
Right.
mind is already like going there.
Yeah.
That's so funny. You're gonna get off this video and you're like, okay, write that. Where's my file? I'm gonna
I
write
know,
that
right?
down. That is so fun. Okay, so where can people go to find more information about you and your books and the cover reveal? Because I want to go find that.
Sure. So you can find all the information you need on ToniShiloh.com. It has the links to my social media, which is where I posted the cover reveal for
Ooh.
on Facebook and Instagram. And it also has the books coming out. And yeah, newsletter sign up.
Okay, that's very good. Okay, newsletter sign up because I love when I get that inside scoop from the newsletter from authors. So that'd be
It's really
awesome.
fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. But before we go, I want you to put the cover up one more time.
Okay.
So, because it is just awesome. Okay, In Search of a Prince. You have to get it. I am loving it so much. I'm about halfway through. I cannot wait to see what happens. I'll probably be like messaging Toni so I finish. I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready for the next one, but I'm gonna have to wait till September. So,
Well, at least it's not too far behind, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know that if I had to wait till next year, that'd be bad. But
Right.
well, Toni, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.